Hi, my name's Haley, and I just finished up a comic series that I've been working on for almost 10 years. It's called Heroic Shenanigans. I've got 2 books so far, and as of the filming of this video, I am running the Kickstarter for book 3, so I don't have that physically yet. But the story is complete. It's the first comic story that I have completed. It's been a labor of love for a long time, feels like too long, and I just kind of wanted to do a little retrospective, post-mortem, whatever you want to call it, and just talk about my experience working on this comic, and was it worth it? Did I learn anything? So let's find out. So if you're not familiar with my comic, I will put links down below where you can read it online. It is a webcomic. It is about these 3 main characters, Henry, Emily, and Karen, who go to Camp Kapow, which is a summer camp for superheroes. Why superheroes? That's actually a good question, because I didn't grow up on comics, really. I didn't grow up on like Marvel, DC, that kind of thing. I'd watched a few episodes of Teen Titans as a kid. The original Avengers movie came out when I was in college, which is gonna make me feel old now. But so I got to enjoy the MCU as an adult, but I didn't, when that movie came out, I'm like, okay, I'd heard of like the Hulk and Spider-Man, but I didn't know anything about the Avengers. I enjoyed the movie, but I didn't grow up on those characters or anything. I guess my main superhero inspiration would have to be The Incredibles from Pixar. I've always loved Pixar movies, and I guess that was sort of my inspiration for superheroes, like, because in the Heroic Shenanigans world, it's pretty much people are just born with powers. Either you have superpowers or you don't. Which is how it seemed to be in The Incredibles. Like, it's just genetic, because obviously the whole family has superpowers. But, you get into mainstream comics and it's like, oh, either somebody doesn't even have powers, they're an alien, something happened to them that gave them powers. Like, so there's very few people that actually are just born with their powers. I guess that would be like the mutants from the X-Men would be like the main thing. But a lot of mainstream superheroes, it's not like, oh, I'm just a regular human, was born to regular human parents and just have superpowers. But that was my whole concept of them. So that's just what I was working off of with this story. It wasn't really like a conscious decision. It was just kind of like, oh, this is how superheroes are, so that's how they're going to be. The inspiration for the story and characters in Heroic Shenanigans came less from traditional superheroes and more from stories that I was really into at the time, that I was kind of started formulating it when I was in high school, which would be Harry Potter and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Those were some of and still are, some of my favorite stories and characters. And the thing that really drew me to those was, both of those stories are about a group of young people, teenagers, who come together and become friends despite their different personalities. They all have powers and they work together to save the world. And that was just a type of story that I guess really resonated with me. And those were the kinds of characters and worlds that I really enjoyed. So my characters are less of traditional superheroes than more of, oh, they're in the vein of something like this, or like the characters from those stories aren't superheroes, but they are people with powers who save the world, which is that also not what a superhero is? So, I mean, unless you're Batman, he doesn't have powers. But you know what? Sokka doesn't have powers either, and he's the best character in Avatar. So, whatever. Those were some of my main sources of inspiration, whether I was drawing from them purposefully or not. And that's kind of just what shaped my storytelling, because those were the kinds of stories that I liked to read and watch. So that's the kind of story that I wanted to tell. And then, and I was very involved in those worlds. Like, once I finished watching Avatar and finished reading Harry Potter, I sought out a lot of fan art. I was on DeviantArt at the time, and I loved looking at fan art and drawing fan art. That's where I spent a lot of time online, and on DeviantArt is where I discovered webcomics. I would read stuff like Lackadaisy, Nimona, Cucumber Quest, Harpy G. And so I was introduced to that in the way of, okay, these artists, for the most part, it's one person working on everything. They write the story, they do all of the art, everything, self-publish. So that was my impression of comics, and I did not think that that was something I wanted to do. I can remember very clearly thinking like, oh, that would be a lot of drawing, like a lot of drawing the same characters over and over. Like that just sounds so hard. And in my mind, I did have the main characters for Heroic Shenanigans had existed in my mind for a long time. And I wanted to do something with them. I didn't really have any plans as to what. I was thinking maybe someday I'll write novels, maybe, you know, in some nebulous future where I somehow am famous and have connections, I'll get like movies made out of them, you know, that sort of thing where I don't really have a plan, but just sort of vague dreams. And then my senior year of college, I majored in art, and so everyone had to do a gallery show, and I was like racking my brain like, what am I gonna do for this show? And then all of a sudden I was just like, I'm gonna do a comic. I don't know how that's gonna work. That sounds crazy, but I pitched it to my professors and they basically were like, well, you can't just have like a printed book sitting there. Like you got to have stuff on the walls. So what I ended up doing was what became the first chapter of Heroic Shenanigans, and everything was each panel, and there were sometimes multiple cutouts for panels. They were all cutouts and stacked on top of each other, and the panels all laid out so that you could walk through the gallery and read the comic, which was a pretty cool experience. It was surreal standing there at the opening and seeing people walk through and reading it, and some of them get into a funny part and laughing. And then after doing that, I was like, you know what? I want to keep going with this. This was a lot of work and stressful, but it was very fun. And I love these characters and these stories, and I love webcomics. So I want to make one of my own. And so I just jumped into it I had ideas for the story, but I didn't have like a determined beginning, middle, and end, which a lot of I'm not inside the other authors' heads, so I don't know what they're thinking, but from the outside, definitely there's webcomics that look like they are kind of just going and aren't planned. I'm sure there's definitely some that have that end. There's some that just go on infinite hiatus, which is what I did not want to do with Heroic Shenanigans. That's why I ended it, even if the ending maybe isn't as like satisfying as it could be, or there's maybe not unsatisfying, but there's a lot more ideas that I have that did not fit into it. But I just thought, you know what, for right now, I want to end this story and move on to something else. My ideas, my visions have changed since I started it. I mean, nearly 10 years ago, like I was a lot younger. I was a different person in a lot of ways. And just the way that I think and see things have changed. So when I first went into this comic, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a webcomic artist. And then Heroic Shenanigans is going to be my thing. And that's what I'll be working on. And now in the way that I want to work and in the way that I like consuming comics as well, it has shifted into more standalone graphic novels. Like that's what I would like to do now. And that's what I like to read. Like now I don't read nearly as many webcomics. Mostly I seek out something that's already completed. My tastes have changed. And so in what I read, and then in also what I want to create. So I may return to Heroic Shenanigans someday. I would like to, because the characters are still like really near and dear to my heart. And there's other characters that haven't even been introduced into the story yet that I have ideas for. And kind of in my mind, it was kind of like, oh, there's like multiple seasons. So like what the whole complete story is right now, like that'd be season 1 or like book 1. Cause you know, my brain was in like Harry Potter mode where it's like each book is a different year. But my own experiences of camp went into what Camp Kapow looks like. Obviously it wasn't a camp for superheroes, but it was the camp that I went to is a very important part of my life, because when I was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I think it was a couple months later. My family and I went to a camp that was specifically for kids with diabetes and their families. I have no idea how different my life would be if I had not gone to that camp, because being newly diagnosed with a medical condition that is going to be with me the rest of my life and having to learn how to deal with this, and being so young, like I'd never heard of insulin. I didn't know what a pancreas was. And now all this stuff is thrown at me where it's like, oh, you have to learn how to live your life in a different way. Going to that camp, it was like the non-diabetic kids were like oh, we feel like second class citizens, like not in a bad way, but just like the diabetic kids were like the cool ones in the cool club. And it was just a really amazing experience to get to be with other kids who are going through the same thing and realize I'm not alone. Like, I can do this. This can even be fun. Like, this is not the end of my life. This is a whole new beginning. And that was just probably more formative to me as a young person than I can even know. Being diabetic is not the same thing as having superpowers. One's probably a lot more fun than the other, but you know, I do have characters who see it as a burden. And then throughout the story, they meet other people like them and realize like, hey, we're not alone. Like, this is okay. I can live like this. And maybe my life is even better in some ways for this. All right. Lighting change because I've been talking too long. Now the sun's going down. So another thing that has, I guess, happened because of Heroic Shenanigans is just opportunities that I've had. I've been to several Comic Cons now. I have lost track of how many, but I did, the first one that I went to, I did have Heroic Shenanigans books. It was not the big ones that I have now. It was, I might still have a copy of one somewhere, but it was just, they were smaller and just had the first 2 chapters in them. Because I wanted to come and have something to sell, even though I had a bunch of like stickers and other fan art stuff. The first convention that I ever attended was Fanime in California, and that was really big. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a thing that like artists that I follow online like would go to, but not me. But then when I was there in the artist alley, I actually saw 2 people that I knew had a table. That was a time that showed me like, oh, okay, wait, maybe this is something I can do. Like where I thought, oh, I could never make a webcomic, that's for other people. And then I actually did it and was like, wait, I can do this and I enjoy this. And now I've been to several conventions, and at a convention that I was at several years ago, my table was across the aisle from someone named Roland Mann. And he had this, actually have it somewhere. Yes, this book called Tiny that he had written, and he had like a banner of this character, and I saw her and I liked the art style, and so that drew me over there. And I saw like, okay, he's a writer, he didn't draw any of this stuff, he has a bunch of different artists working for him. So I was like, hey, if you're ever looking for another artist, I'm interested. And now I've done a bunch of work for him and his publishing company Silverline, like Bear. He's the writer on Bear, which I did the art for. So there, that was like such a little tease here. You can see more. But yeah, so that was an opportunity that came about because of Heroic Shenanigans. Now I'm working on comics with other people and learning so much more about that, because like I said earlier, a lot of times webcomics are just one person doing everything, and that's how it is with me and Heroic Shenanigans, how it was, because I'm done. But with the people at Silverline, a lot of them came out of having worked in Marvel and DC, so they did like a workflow where one person was the writer, another person was the penciler, another person was the inker, another person was the colorist. And so I have since colored some comics, but I haven't done, and then Bear, I did the art and not the writing, but I've never like, I would be scared to like pencil and then be like, okay, I gotta make sure all the details are in because somebody else is going to ink over this. When I'm inking over my own stuff, sometimes I leave details out because I know what's supposed to be there. And that's just a totally different way of thinking about making comics. Like that was so new to me. I was like, really? You guys, like someone does a different part? And they were like, well, that's weird. You do everything else. You're crazy. You do all the things. Which yeah, it does take a lot longer when it's only one person working on it, because I could be coloring page 1 while the penciler's penciling page 3 and inker's penciling page 2. So there's, you know, you can be working on stuff getting done faster. But I've always thought like, no, Heroic Shenanigans, like that's my baby. Like I would never let anyone else touch it. But a lot of artists now, it seems to be common for someone to draw and ink and then somebody else to color. I also got an opportunity to do a few flat colors for Space Boy, which is probably my all-time favorite comic. I did some flat colors for about 10 of the episodes, and I learned a lot working on Spaceway, because I, like, from reading the comic, I could tell that it was a limited color palette, but I didn't know how limited until I actually had the colors and realized, oh, like the orange of Amy's hair, like that orange is used other places. Whereas in my comic, I'd be like, Karen's red hair, like that's her hair color. Nobody else can use that. But it's like, no, every orange is that orange. And you don't always notice it, because when the same color is, now we're gonna get into color theory, when the same color is next to a different color, it can look different by comparison. So it doesn't look like it's the same color over and over, but it makes the whole thing look unified. So very brief little color lesson there. But yeah, so that's something that I learned. And then halfway through Heroic Shenanigans, I went through and I made a document. I was like, okay, here's every color I've used basically in the whole comic. Which ones can I combine? And then I made a color palette. So I had colors for each character. And then I also had just like, here's all the colors. So if I'm like, oh, okay, I need a blue, let's pick one of these blues instead of just making up a new one. And so going forward in other comics, that's something that I will do as well, is have a color palette picked out beforehand. And that's the comics that I've colored for Silverline. I've done that. So that was something that I learned that I didn't know when I started my comic. Other thing, I mean, there's so many things that I've learned that I probably can't even like put into words, just things that I've picked up and ways that I think differently now. But definitely learning to draw digitally. I mean, like I said, the show was all pen and paper. And then chapter 2, I drew and inked on paper and then colored digitally because I had a Wacom tablet without a screen. And I found it hard to draw and then have the drawing show up not where my hand was. I've since learned to do that, but I've been working on a laptop that had a touch screen and tablet screen. Another thing that I've learned through making Heroic Shenanigans and just how I have grown and changed as an artist and a storyteller is that you don't have to tell this huge world-changing story. Because like I said in the beginning, my favorite stories were the ones where a group of kids saves the world. Maybe this group of kids just saves their world, just saves something small that's important to them. Because, you know, those stories where, you know, we defeat the Fire Lord, we defeat Voldemort, like that's great. But I've also come to enjoy stories where like maybe there's something that's really important to this character and it's not huge in the grand scheme of the world, but it's important to them, and that's something that people can resonate with still. A story does not have to be this grand scale to be a good story. So that's kind of the stories that I want to tell next. And even with Heroic Shenanigans, you know, when I started, it was like, yeah, it's going to be like this Harry Potter type story. It could be that someday, because I would like to revisit these characters someday. I don't know when. I'm not going to think about that because I need a break. As much as I love them, I need a break, and I need to work on some other projects and learn and grow as an artist from those as well, and then come back with new things that I've learned. I mean, if I could say like dream big again, like how I did in the beginning, what my ultimate dreams for Heroic Shenanigans would be, I would love for it to get the Lackadaisy treatment. As I mentioned, Lackadaisy earlier was one of the early webcomics that I read, and it's now getting turned into an indie animated series, which is so cool. That would be my ultimate dream, for Heroic Shenanigans to be an animated series. I think that would be a great way to tell that story and more stories in that world. That is not to say though that, I mean, I love animation, but like animation, TV, movies, whatever, like that is not the end all be all. Comics are their own wonderful medium that can tell stories in a unique way that movies and animation and like prose novels can't. So comics are themselves like an amazing product. They're not a vehicle for becoming a movie or anything. Like adaptations are great, but that's not like, oh, once your book, your comic has become a movie, like once it's been adapted, like then it's reached its final form. Some stories maybe, like I just said, I would love to see Heroic Shenanigans as that, because the story, the concept for it has existed in my head for longer than I've been a comic artist. But there's definitely other stories that I want to tell where I would be perfectly happy for like, this is a graphic novel and this is what it is. This is the definitive version. I love art and stories, and I have grown to see that comics and graphic novels are a really amazing way to tell those stories. And as you can see, yeah, I've got, I mean, when I first started Heroic Shenanigans, I don't think I had any, and there's like another shelf above me, I don't think I had any of, and this is a pretty small collection compared to some people's, but I've got like 3 shelves worth of books. Was it worth spending 10 years on this comic? Monetarily, no. I haven't made much money on it. It hasn't become a job, but maybe someday comics will, and this was my first, okay, now I've got this one done, now I can learn and grow. Maybe it paved the way for a career path later on. Either way, it's something that I love doing. I'm not going to stop doing it. Was it worth it in terms of what I've learned? Absolutely. Do I wish I had worked on it more consistently and been able to end the story sooner? Maybe, but if I had ended it sooner, it would have been different. Because again, I went into it with ideas, but not really a plan, which that's my next comic that I'm already working on, because even though I told myself, oh, it's gonna be so nice to have a break, I can't. So I guess that's a good thing that I know that I love doing this, because I can't stop thinking about my next story. So that one is already, like, the story's written. We got over 150 pages thumbnailed, so that's definitely going to happen, and it's not going to take me 10 years to work on it. So look forward to that. It's called Zara of the Zunari. That's my my journey with becoming a comic artist, I guess, and realizing, wait, this is a lot of work. This is stressful. I love it. I would not have it any other way. So hopefully you learned something from this, maybe? Yeah, I didn't even talk about like the whole posting of a webcomic, and with it being on the internet versus just working on it and then not getting any feedback, which it wasn't like immensely popular or anything, so it's not like I was getting tons of feedback on it or anything, but seeing that people are enjoying it does help me to keep going with it and to not give up, especially kids. Like, there are these kids that every time I see them, they're like, when's your next book coming out? And I love that. Like, I'm so glad. Like, that's really, like, I'm doing it for the kids. You know, like, I think adults could like my stuff too, and they do. But that is really, like, I love seeing kids reading my comics and just getting into comics in general. Like, I was, that full circle on the camp thing, I was a counselor at a camp this past summer, and a couple of the girls in my cabin were obsessed with the Lackadaisy cartoon, which as of right now, there's only just the pilot episode is all that's out, and they were obsessed with it, and I told them, like, hey, you know, this is a comic too, right? And it was just so cool to see something that inspired me, like, now inspiring another generation. They were, you know, I had to tell them, like, okay, I love that you're writing fanfic, but, like, we're doing something else now, you gotta put the book away, but not to discourage you from your creativity. I love this. Comics that inspired me are inspiring younger people, and hopefully my comics will inspire younger people, and I would love someone someday to be like, oh, I'm writing comics now because I read Heroic Shenanigans or whatever other comic. Thanks for coming on this journey, the journey of this video, the journey of my comic, and I am so excited to take what I've learned and bring it to my next project. And if you've got a comic project that you're working on, I would love to see that and let me know how that's going and what has inspired you to work on that. So thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're interested in reading Heroic Shenanigans, if you haven't, I will put links below for you to read that. And thank you so much for watching this, and I will see you next time. Bye.